Naturally, these are not all the crimes. The list is not exhaustive. But we do carry out this work on a daily basis, and we inform the international community and our public about this work. Coming back to the specific facts. On the night of February 6, Belgrade again came under fire using American HIMARS MLRS. Thankfully, there were no casualties. Unfortunately, in the following days from the 7th to the 10th of February, missile strikes on the regional center, as well as UAV attacks on residential buildings in other settlements of the Belgrade region, led to the death of 1 and injury of 17 people. Bryansk region. From the 4th to the 7th of February, the armed forces of Ukraine launched several combined strikes on civilian objects in the region using HIMARS MLRS, long-range Neptune missiles, and jet-type drones. 5 people were wounded. There was destruction in the residential sector, and, most horrifyingly, they carry out strikes deliberately against the civilian population, against the social infrastructure, and then make a second strike on the rescue and relief facilities, those who are supposed to help the injured and the wounded. There is destruction in the residential and medical institutions. Administrative buildings and a church were damaged. On the 8th to the 9th of February, Banderites attacked the territory of an agro-industrial enterprise in the village of Krapivna and residential buildings in a number of settlements in the Bryansk region with drones. 3 people were injured. The Zaporozhye region, on February 6th to 7th, due to Ukrainian UAV attacks, 3 people were injured, 1 of them died. On February 10th, the AFU attacked a funeral procession in the village of Skelki, Vasilievsky municipal district. As a result of the attack, the rector of the local Assumption Church, Father Sergei Klyakin, died, and 6 other people received shrapnel wounds of varying severity. Kursk region, on February 7th, as a result of a fire caused by the fall of an AFU drone on the territory of a private house in the village of Verkhny Lybash, a man died and 3 people were injured, including a 13-year-old girl. On February 10th, following AFU drone strikes on cars in the area of the village of Yemkovo and the village of Krasny Polyana, 3 civilians, including a 16-year-old teenager, were injured. The Lugansk People's Republic, on February 3rd, a young woman and a young man were killed by a Ukrainian drone attack on a minibus near the village of Novokrasnyanka, and on February 5th, as a result of a UAV strike on an apartment building in the city of Rovenki, a family of 5 people was injured, including children aged 5 months, 3 and 7 years. Rostov region, on February 5th, a civilian was injured in the city of Bataysk due to falling debris from a downed AFU drone. Kherson region, on February 3rd, as a result of artillery shelling by the AFU of a crowded place near shops and a multifunctional center in the city of Novaya Kakhovka, 3 civilians were killed and several people were injured. On February 5th to 8th, 12 people, mostly elderly, suffered from the enemy shelling and drone attacks in the cities of Alyoshki, Kakhovka and Golye Pristin, as well as on the road between the villages of Male Kakhovka and Tavriske. On February 10th, as a result of a deliberate attack by a Ukrainian UAV in the village of Velika Lepeticha, 2 girls aged 9 and 10 received multiple shrapnel wounds. What is their fault? What is their crime for which they were supposedly punished by the AFU? The crime was just playing outside on the street. A surviving resident of the city of Seversk in the DPR shared with the media heartbreaking evidence of crimes by the AFU, who killed all her relatives and numerous citizens. Her younger brother and other unarmed young men were shot by the neo-Banderites under the pretext of refusing to join them. On February 6th, in Moscow, you are aware of that, this was reported by the media and our law enforcers, an assassination attempt was made on Lieutenant General Vladimir Stepanovich Alexeyev, first deputy head of the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. who headed our country's delegation at the trilateral peace talks in Abu Dhabi. It is noteworthy that the day before, Zelensky in his TV address announced the coordination, this is a quote, of new such operations on our territory with the recently appointed head of the SBU, Evgeny Khmara, who recently got his hand in committing such attacks in Russia. This terrorist attack once again confirmed the focus of the Zelensky regime on constant provocations aimed at disrupting the negotiation process on the settlement, which was supposedly meant to end the conflict and settle it. Apparently, Kiev is ready to do anything to try to prevent the achievement of a just peace. But they will be punished in a fair and legal manner. Russian law enforcement agencies continue to bring Ukrainian criminals, their accomplices and foreign mercenaries to criminal responsibility. The investigative committee identified a few UAV operators, Andrei Tsit and Sergei Zenich, who committed terrorist attacks using drones on August 2nd and October 30th, 2025 in the village of Kruglia Polyana and the village of Gudovka, Bryansk region, as a result of which 2 people were injured, 1 of them died. Law enforcement agencies are taking measures to locate the criminals. Criminal cases have been initiated against a few militants, Vasily Ivanitsky and Anton Zaitsev, who carried out terrorist activities in the Kursk region in 2025 and were previously captured by Russian servicemen. The guilt of another Ukraine Nazi, Alexander Sechegov, in similar cases has been confirmed. Spanish mercenary Arobo Mordillo Alberto, who participated in hostilities as part of the AFU, was sentenced in absentia to 14 years in prison. He has been put on the international wanted list. Also, I would like to say that they have modern and historical sources of support. The AFU and the Kiev regime are not just doing something similar to what had been committed by their new so-called heroes, Bandera, Shukhevich, and those to whom they pledged their allegiance. We are talking about the direct historical links, direct historical connotations taking root in the crimes of World War II. 83 years ago, on February 9, 1943, in the village of Porosle, first Rovno region of the Ukrainian SSR, Ukrainian banderites committed the first mass murder of peaceful Poles. 100 of cutthroats, under the command of Bandera's fellow villager, Perignak, hacked 173 civilians to death with axes. This monstrous, inhumanly cruel, bloody crime marked the beginning of the further mass extermination of the Polish population throughout Volyn, which followed 5 months later and went down in history as the Volyn massacre, at the hands of Ukrainian collaborators, supported by the German Nazis since pre-war times. Ukrainians themselves, fellow villagers of Poles, Russians, Belarusians, Jews, and representatives of many other nationalities also died. Just like then, modern Ukraine Nazis have already repeatedly demonstrated their kinship with the banderites of the past, committing no less and often more cruel crimes against Russian and Ukrainian civilians with the complicity of foreign mercenaries and Western sponsors. The listed facts confirm the relevance of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats emanating from its territory. All these goals will definitely be achieved, as stated on numerous occasions by the Russian authorities. And now look at their back vocals, so to speak, a choir of those who provide them with financial, military, political and other types of support. Kaja Kallas, as an EU diplomat, stated that they were making their own lists of demands for Russia to settle the crisis in Ukraine, as she said. Neither Kallas nor von der Leyen nor their predecessors that they work with, none of them in Western Europe and none in NATO have ever seen or witnessed any of the terrorist attacks that I've been talking about. They turn a blind eye to all the terrorist attacks that we talk about, that our law enforcers and the victims and the witnesses are talking.
Peaceful efforts for many years. That is something. And instead of that, we hear new demands. They imposed unacceptable conditions for us, be it the peace formula of Zelensky or the placing of some kind of the international peacekeeping contingent troops in Ukraine. But none of that can be a realistic framework for peaceful arrangements. But they've been telling us about that, presenting it as their demands. At the same time, they continue pumping the Kiev regime with weaponry, and by doing that, they help escalate the conflict and carry out terrorist attacks by the Kiev regime. There's been a continued flow of Western military assistance to Ukraine, and they opted for merging the Ukrainian and European defense capabilities by streamlining close cooperation in military and industrial system. At the current stage, the EU is the one that does not allow the Kiev regime to have any compromise whatsoever. The position of our country regarding the Ukrainian settlement is well known. We have repeatedly outlined it at the summit level. Moscow has always remained open for a dialogue on an equal footing with all those who is ready to make a constructive contribution. But so far, until the EU does not understand that alleviating the root causes of the Ukrainian conflict is not a concession to Russia, but rather a contribution to the long-term stability and security in Europe, we cannot talk about their role in the peaceful settlement whatsoever. Besides, in order to be at the negotiating table, you need to behave. What the EU has been doing right now, the rhetoric that they make, the kind of insults and the lies that they keep on telling, the lies that they did not rectify. I'm talking about their shenanigans with the Minsk agreements, and all this does not allow us to even consider them as acceptable neighbors or rather interlocutors. We took note of the heated debate in Ireland regarding the proposal by the European Commission to provide €90 billion loan to Ukraine for 2026-2027. The representatives of major opposition parties chastised the government of Michal Martin for his readiness to provide these funds, and the majority of these funds will be used for military expenses. As Dublin agrees to such an initiative, basically it signed up to the continued escalation of military hostilities, and it will be only beneficial for the producers of military products, including from the EU countries. The EU allegedly was conceived as a peaceful organization, not a war machine. That's what people who are not happy with this course say. Actually, these funds will be used for terrorist and extremist means, and they will end up in the pockets of unsatiable, corrupt people in Kiev. Dublin has already allocated €464.4 million to the Zelensky regime. At the end of the day, these funds and new allocations will be a burden for rank-and-file Irish taxpayers, and nobody asked them for, and nobody even accounted before them. Probably somebody in Ireland believe in this utopic idea that the expenses will be paid by Russian reparations or stealing of our assets. They will steal it and they will make up for their expenses. However, the majority of Irish people are reasonable and they understand that that is an illusion. From our part, we have to state that joining the plans to fund Kiev puts Ireland even further from the concept of this new military neutrality, as it has repeatedly stated, and it is more involved into the militarization of the European Union. The authorities of the country insist that Dublin should participate in the EU military programs and it should increase military budget, and such policy that is taking place amid a sharp lack of funding to address social and economic issues in Ireland, and it helps destroy the idea on traditional neutrality of the country. This line can lead to the fact that Dublin becomes a tool for geopolitical games of London and Brussels, but that doesn't bother the government of Michal Martin. Another topic is the situation, or rather problems, with aviation fuel in Cuba amid the U.S. unparalleled measures to block supplies of energy to Cuba, the energy blockade, so to speak, including supplies of aviation fuel. We see quite a challenging situation. Our foreign ministry and our embassy in Havana are in constant touch with the Cuban authorities, tourist operators, to provide the necessary assistance to Russian citizens in Cuba, primarily holidaymakers. We assume that the actions of external forces that want to have an aggravated energy crisis in Cuba and the suspension of air flights to Cuba seek to trigger discontent among the population. And against this backdrop, we urge everyone who face this delay in their return to Russia, we ask them to exercise restraint, and at the same time, those who plan to come to Cuba, please take into account all the recommendations of the Economic Development Ministry. Our embassy is doing its utmost to provide assistance to Russian citizens due to the United States actions that have been having this embargo of Cuba, and currently the situation is becoming absurd because they strike the interests of people logistic-wise, and for all this time they've been talking about human rights. Our embassy has been doing its utmost helping the people. There's the hotline operating. We publish promptly information on how to get back home and on the upcoming flights. Please keep in touch with the embassy and follow the webpage of the embassy and social networks of the embassy. You can choose any means that you prefer in this sense. And without any doubt, we keep in touch with all the relevant authorities, all the agencies and the ministries of the Russian government to address this situation and to provide assistance to the Russian citizens. The situation in Moldova. We see another Russophobic and hysterical zeal from the government of Moldova. On the 8th of February, President of the Wrestling Federation criticized the way the national team is formed for the 25th Winter Olympics in Italy. He was outraged that 4 athletes were of Russian descent. Allegedly, they paraded with the Moldovan flag, but in, and I quote, in other circumstances, they would wipe their feet with it, end of quote. I would like to say that these are not just words of some crazy person or an outcast. I cannot describe this man in such a way. He needs to have the necessary medical tests for that, but let me highlight that this is an official who makes such statements on their athletes, the athletes that represent his country and defend the honor of his motherland. in terms of common sense and the health issues, well, we cannot explain that. Unfortunately, such rhetoric has become a commonplace for Moldovan authorities. It is fueling tension in the society, and instead of taking into account the public mood and instead of searching all national compromise, the authorities use this language of hatred. On the 6th of February, the Speaker of the Moldovan Parliament claimed that any citizen of the Republic that has basic knowledge of or education would vote for unifying with Romania, not for unifying the Moldovan society that would overcome this disintegration, but it would vote for unifying with Romania. He tried to mar the period when Bessarabia was part of the Russian Empire from 1812 to 1917, and he noted that from that stage on, the citizens got this idea, this dream, and this sense of injustice. In Moldova, there was an opinion that this showed the disrespect to the Moldovan people, and it revealed the goal of the authorities to eliminate the republic's independence. According to opinion polls, over 70% of Moldovans stand against unifying with Romania, and by the looks of it, the Speaker of the Moldovan Parliament believes that these are the people who lack basic education and knowledge. Since Moldovan politicians allow themselves such things, and since they are so bothered by history, and since they allow themselves to distort history, let me remind you of some facts. During the period when it was part of the Russian Empire, Bessarabia saw positive trends. The population has increased by 7.5 times. According to the All Russia census in 1897, Bessarabia became one of the top three of the most populated territories in Russia. There's been progress in crafts and manufacturing facilities, primarily flour milling, butter making, leather industry, and from 1812 to 1847, the number of craftsmen increased by 2 times. It has doubled from 5 to 12,000 people, and an important landmine was the use of steam engines. In the second half of 1970s, the number of engines increased, amounting to 723. There were significant changes in agriculture. The region cultivated high-quality types of wheat, and it also produced corn, barley, oat. While in terms of wine making, it ranked top in Russia. In 1870, the vineyards were 28,000 hectares, well, approximately, but in 1900 it achieved 80,000 hectares approximately. 70,000 hectares were owned by peasants, and the transport system has been developing. There were positive trends in science and arts, and there was a growth in educational facilities number, and the Moldovan culture and literature was also developed. But what the Romanian rule over the region was accompanied with, and it was from 1918 to 1940, we talked about that repeatedly, shooting down lawlessness, poverty, and mass exodus of the population, and Moldovan citizens do know about that, certainly. By the way, there were requests from journalists en masse regarding the statements by Macron to revive contacts with Russia. You know what? The thing is that the French president has recently made an interview with the Deutsche Zeitung on rebuilding channels of communication with Russia at the technical level. That's how he put it. And he intends to share the outcome of these contacts with European partners in order to develop the well-organized European approach, and that's his direct quote. Indeed, over the past month, the French president has repeatedly voiced his desire publicly to revive Russia-French dialogue at the summit level and to have a telephone call with the Russian president, but as it always happens with the French colleagues, words do not translate into action. We have never abandoned contacts at the summit level with Paris. Let me remind you that this was not our choice, it was the decision of the French government. Certainly it is completely entitled to do as it pleases, but probably it is important for actions to match words in some way. And naturally, if we talk about their desire to rectify previous mistakes made by the French government, I believe that this aspiration might be sincere, but it should be matched with deeds, and certainly we can only welcome such an aspiration. But the thing is that whether the French are indeed ready to rectify these mistakes, or are they playing these tactical games, what is the added value of such a dialogue given the well-known pro-Ukrainian mood in Paris? I'm talking about not supporting the culture, history and statehood of Ukraine, but I'm talking about support for the terrorist and extremist activities of the Kiev regime. Recently, we've been talking about that. Lately, over the past days, we've seen a lot of shellings, murders, terrorist attacks, extremist actions, the losses among the civilian population, and how many children were wounded. This is all done by the Kiev regime using weaponry supplied by the West and funded by the West. And certainly the role of the Élysée Palace is huge here. It begs the question, have we heard anything from the President of France that would condemn the terrorist attacks by the Kiev regime? We haven't heard any of that. It's an open secret that the French side derailed the bilateral relations. It has undermined trust to its way to reach an agreement, and we talked about the confession by President Hollande that he manipulated the Minsk agreements, as well as the readiness to be an appropriate mediator in the Ukrainian crisis. France remains the flagship leader in the anti-Russian cause of Europe, and it is hyping on this idea of a Russian threat. One of the main sponsors of the Kiev regime is Paris as well. They talk about placing military troops on the ground in Ukraine, including the French troops, and we have repeatedly mentioned that such plans are dangerous, and we have to state that few other European states do so much to undermine Russia-US negotiations as France. That is why we prefer to judge not by words and promises, but by actions, and we do not harbor any illusions regarding the genuine intentions of Paris. We have all the grounds to believe that it is not about the readiness to reach a serious agreement with our country, given the fundamental interests of our country, but it is an intention to impose the options for us and the options that are advanced by the EU and the coalition of the willing. They do not wish peace, and I'm talking about options to have a settlement. I have already commented on them. I'm talking about the statements by Kaja Kallas. And another case that has to do with modern times and the World War II. And some people cherish the historical memory in order to prevent something of this kind happening in the future. And other regimes try to put this truth in top secret letters, hoping that it will never be opened.
The federal government of Mark Carney confidently leads the second category. It has become known that the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada supported the position of Federal Library and Archives Canada not to release the list of hundreds of Nazi criminals and collaborators who found refuge in the land of the maple leaf in Canada. We are talking about the list of the Jules Deschênes Commission, which in 1986 to 1987 established. After World War II, Canada became a haven for about 800 Nazis and their henchmen, people involved in murders, genocide, and service in the SS. Those who committed the Holocaust. The Canadian state hid them. 40 years have passed, and it would seem that all statutes of limitations, both moral and legal, should have expired, but it turns out that disclosing this information is allegedly impossible. Canada's argumentation is a masterpiece of modern Western political rhetoric, absolutely detached from reality. The publication of names, it is claimed, will damage international relations, and even, I quote, adversely affect the defense of a foreign state allied to Canada. Guess what state they are talking about? Ukraine, the current Banderite Ukraine, which is basing its current policy on neo-Nazism. I will translate the statement from Canadian bureaucracies into Russian. If we publish the truth that executioners from the 14th Waffen-Grenadier Division of the SS Galician Division lived and live here, this will confirm Russian narratives and harm the current Kiev regime, which glorifies the collaborators of the Third Reich. The problem is not that these criminals lived or live in Canada. It's something else. The concealment of Nazis will become generally known, and this will be confirmed by solid documentary evidence. Instead of confessing, the current authorities will reveal that they've been hiding and raising future generations for politicians who are supposed to bring these neo-Nazi notes to the modern international relations. But instead of confessing and saying, yes, there was such a dark page in the history of our country, of Canada, and the Canadian authorities could have said that they condemned it, but instead, Ottawa declares the truth to be both a state secret and even a threat. Canadian authorities are hiding behind the screen of so-called national security. But what security are we talking about? Is this the security carried out by hiding the fact that they've been hiding the Nazis, that they have blood on their hands, that they've been hiding the future elites of Canada? What kind of security can be built on lies and the lives of the murdered people, the tormented children? What moral authority is possible with such doublethink? This approach insults the memory of all those who gave their lives in the fight against the brown plague of the 20th century. Let us recall that Canada was part of the anti-Hitler coalition, and the fight against Nazism was a common cause then. Under the Land-Lease program, Canadian participants in the Arctic convoys delivered large volumes of aluminium, ammunition and military equipment, as well as food, to Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. The 3rd Canadian Infantry Division successfully captured Juno Beach during the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, and advanced deep into France. In the same year, Canadian troops distinguished themselves in the Italian campaign, breaking through the powerful Hitler line, and by 1945 they played a key role in the liberation of the Netherlands. If there are still decent people left in the leadership of Canada, I will perhaps ask them a historic question. But I think it is their duty to declassify this list of the Jules Deschênes Commission, not for Russian propaganda, but for historical hygiene, for historical memory, to cleanse their own tarnished conscience. This should be done so that Canadians not only know about the exploits of their ancestors on the fields of the World War II, but also about whom the authorities of their country sheltered after the war, because they are currently killing the memory of the Canadians who are fighting on the right side of history against Nazism and fascism, those who were defeating the remnants of the Third Reich. As long as this list lies under lock and key, the shadow of complicity falls not on the dead criminals, but on the currently living politicians who cover for them in Canada, those in power, like Christy Freeland, who was the Foreign Minister of Canada and later Vice Prime Minister, granddaughter of Chomiak. And speaking of modern neo-Nazism, Latvia continues the accelerated policy of total de-Russification of its public life. After the ban on the Russian language in the school education system, it was the turn of healthcare institutions since January 30th of this year as part of the implementation of discriminatory amendments to the national security law prohibiting the employment of citizens of Russia and Belarus at critical infrastructure facilities. A wave of cuts in medical institution employees, holders of Russian and Belarusian passports, has been launched. What is this? This is neo-Nazism as it is. The people are being segregated and bullied on a national basis. There is no doubt that this will cause serious damage to the already noticeably limping sphere of medical care for the residents of Latvia against the background of rapidly growing rates of depopulation and the flight of qualified specialists abroad. Over the past 20 years, the population of Latvia has decreased by 18%, and its number in 2021 equaled the level of 1925. This is the highest depopulation rate among European states. And this Baltic state ranks second among the EU countries in terms of mortality. The poverty level of the population is 25%. During our briefings, we regularly talk about the discriminatory policy of the Baltic authorities towards everything Russian. We talk about this, not because we have nothing else to talk about. This is because we have to share this information with the broader public. We should draw international attention to the crimes of the neo-Nazi regimes of the 21st century. And I must say that we are always ready and willing to provide assistance for the employment of the specialists who are being bullied and repressed in such a shameful manner in these countries. Those who associate themselves with Russia, the Russian culture, history and nationality. We have demand for specialists of various professions in our country. We have experience of hosting highly qualified and experienced specialists. We have the necessary legal framework for that. And please keep that in mind. And here's another fact. On the 1st of February, vandals once again desecrated the monument in Bulgaria, the Alyosha monument, reminding of the victory of the Soviet people in World War II, and it's becoming a victim of barbaric attacks. However, the Bulgarian authorities, as before, turn a blind eye to such so-called incidents and, by their inaction, indulge outright manifestations of revanchism. We see neo-Nazis marching with torches in Sofia, houses painted with swastikas. We observe with bitterness how monuments to heroes who liberated Bulgaria from the Hitlerite yoke are desecrated and demolished. We have to state that the ruling elite in Bulgaria has consigned the anti-fascist heritage of its ancestors to oblivion. At the same time, we observe something else: Bulgarian citizens carrying flowers to monuments to Soviet heroes engaged in protecting and repairing memorial objects. Those who honor the feat of their compatriots who fought shoulder to shoulder with Red Army soldiers against the hordes of the Wehrmacht. The grateful memory of the people is alive, as we see, and we are on the same path with these people. Together, we will defend historical truth and common values. Moving on to Japan. On February 7th, Japan organized celebrations of the so-called Days of the Northern Territories. As happens annually, They were generally of a defiantly provocative anti-Russian nature. The top leadership of Japan, taking advantage of this occasion, once again recalled certain claims to part of the Russian Kuril Islands, which they stubbornly call the Northern Territories. At the same time, an inappropriate link was once again made with the situation in Ukraine. I can't understand this. Are the Japanese willing for everyone to believe that their country is facing the same situation as Ukraine? If Tokyo is willing to comment on the situation in Ukraine, they should use the facts of the Kiev terrorist attacks against the social infrastructure sites, the civilian population, the murders of children, women, the elderly, the torturing of the people. They shouldn't just wait for a so-called Day of the Northern Territories to draw parallels. Our embassy in Tokyo is ready to share all the facts regarding the Kiev regime crimes to the Foreign Ministry of Japan, so that next time when any of the Tokyo ideologists is willing to draw parallels with Ukraine, they will have an opportunity to use these facts. Once again, they are still making this link with Ukraine, perhaps to justify their own clumsy steps, as a result of which relations with our country reached a point of no return. Perhaps this is why they are doing this. I repeat that the more they draw these clumsy parallels, the more our embassy in Tokyo will keep reminding the official Japanese authorities of the actual facts that are taking place in Ukraine. The terrorist attacks, the extremist attacks, the murders of civilians, the torturing of the people. Ritual calls were heard from Tokyo to increase pressure on Russia and introduce new sanctions against our country. They didn't mention how this would affect the Japanese economy, but this looks like a ritual already. For our part, we would like to clearly state that Russia's legitimate sovereignty over the Kuril Islands is determined by the results of World War II, enshrined in the Russian constitution, and is not subject to revision. Today we were talking about the Olympics, and we had questions about it, on the participation of Russian athletes in particular. I would like to say that last week, as you know, the 25th Winter Olympics in Italy started from the 6th to the 22nd of February. The Olympic Games are always a celebration of sport, serving as a symbol of unity, the pursuit of perfection, fair competition, respect for the values underlying the Olympic movement and underlying the Olympic Charter. We are convinced that sport must remain neutral in the best sense of the word, and international sports competition must remain open to all athletes without exception. Having overcome all difficulties and restrictions, 13 Russians received admission to competitions in 6 sports. They are taking part in the Games in a neutral status, without a flag. At the same time, despite everything, for us these athletes are representatives of Russia, and we will certainly follow their performances and root for them. We will continue to restore the rights of domestic athletes and return Russian sport to the international arena. About 70 international federations allow adult athletes from Russia to international starts, and juniors once again received the opportunity to perform at competitions under the national flag and with the anthem. We count on the speedy restoration of the full status of the Russian Olympic Committee. For our part, we will contribute to this in every possible way. Also, I would like to mention several announcements. We always celebrate various historically valuable occasions, especially when they bring together citizens of various countries and peoples living in different corners of our planet. And now we are looking forward to the celebrations of the Eastern or Oriental New Years. Each country celebrates this in their own way, and we always congratulate the representatives of the diplomatic corps from these countries accredited to Moscow, who celebrate the traditional New Year, or the Lunar New Year, or the Eastern New Year, for whom this is one of the major or the main festivities of the year. And now I would like to mention another good tradition. Moscow will host the celebration events for the Chinese New Year. The festival will be organized from the 16th of February to the 1st of March in the Russian capital. One of the central events will be the opening ceremony of the festival, which will take place on the Menezhneia Square. Just like last year, Moscow Metro will launch a themed train. Colorful shows and concerts will take place at numerous venues in the capital. You can immerse yourself in the holiday atmosphere at the Museum of Moscow, Apothecary Garden, Moscow Zoo, Bolotnaya Square, Central Children's Store, in the capital's entertainment centers, and even at our major shopping centers. While Moscow celebrates the Spring Festival in Chinese style, in Beijing, one can get acquainted with the traditions of the broad Maslenitsa and meet the spring the Russian way. From February 19th to the 22nd, the Moscow Maslenitsa in Beijing festival will be held in the capital's Chaoyang Park. Guests of the event can expect folk festivities with games and round dances, a fair with pancakes, masterclass and musical program. I invite everyone to join the celebrations and plunge into this unforgettable festive atmosphere. In the upcoming Eastern Year of the Horse, I would like to wish everyone good health and prosperity, to always remain in the saddle. And we will definitely share more kind words during the opening of this festival in Moscow. And I would like to invite all of you to attend this event in the Russian capital. This will be very interesting and colorful. I know the statistics. We know that a great number of people, of tourists, come from other regions of Russia and from abroad. And this is a very important occasion which draws great interest online. We see millions of views on the videos of the openings of the festival, and I believe that this year we will see even more attention to the occasion. This is the interesting and colorful number of events that we're expecting. And I have another announcement. This will be published on our social media accounts. I'm talking about the 250th anniversary of the birth of the Greek and Russian diplomat Ivan Kapodistria. These days we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the birth of this Russian and Greek statesman. A major historical material will be available online on our social media accounts. And tomorrow we are celebrating the World Radio Day, which was proclaimed by the UNESCO member states in 2011 and approved by UN General Assembly resolution a year later. The date was not chosen by chance. It was this day in 1946, exactly 80 years ago, that the UN radio was founded. Notably, one of the first voices of the UN's Russian language broadcasting to the world was Soviet diplomat Mr. Dmitry Safonov.
And the history of this first electronic means of communication and future development of the international radio broadcasting is inextricably linked with Russia and the name of a Russian scientist, Alexander Popov. Over 130 years ago, his invention not only allowed our citizens to promptly learn news and to hear each other at a distance, but it also laid the foundation for the ICT technologies that we cannot imagine our life without: the internet, Wi-Fi, quantum computing, many other things. Traditionally, the World Radio Day has a specific topic. In 2026, this topic is radio and AI. In this age of digital technologies, radio has not become the relic of the past. It continues to actively develop and combine analog signals with cutting-edge multimedia formats, and that is why it remains relevant, up-to-date, reliable and affordable tool of getting information in all parts of the world. Introducing AI solutions is another stage in the radio evolution. With due human control and with respect for reliability, security and ethics, while the AI is capable of becoming an official communicator between various systems, and it could simplify technological processes, and it could also increase the number of faithful audience. We regret that 15 years after the proclamation of the World Radio Day, that seeks to increase accessibility to the information, the collective West takes all the efforts in order to put out of broadcasting the viewpoints that it does not like. Today, Russian media and journalists, including the radio broadcasters, face harsh censorship by progressive democracies. The Russian media outlets are being cancelled. We're talking about many Russian media. They face sanctions. Their signal is jammed, and the access is blocked. The sectoral international entities that seek to ensure safety and professional rights of journalists and media freedom, such as UNESCO, the OHCHR, the OSCE, continue to keep silent and ignore any forms of persecution. I'm talking about their response, although they see that the persecution against Russian media outlets have turned into this witch hunt. We believe that it is unacceptable, and we would ensure that these institutions should implement their mandate in good faith, and those who were at the origins of the World Radio Day have special moral responsibility for the honest assessment of the real state of affairs. I would like to congratulate radio companies and media operators that have a lot of things to do with this area. The anchors, the correspondents, the copy editors, producers, sound producers. I wish them new success, achievements, good health and prosperity, certainly. And another date, on the 18th of February, Russia and Zimbabwe celebrate the 45th anniversary of diplomatic relations. It is our trusted and time-tested partner on the African continent. The solid ties of friendship and solidarity between our countries were established during the struggle of the people of Zimbabwe for independence. Over these 45 years, we have established the active bilateral political dialogue, building upon mutual respect and commitment to a fair and multiple world order. We have accumulated positive experience in win-win partnership in trade, economy, investment, science, and educational area. We have shaped a great deal of legal framework. Russia and Zimbabwe continue to actively cooperate on international platforms, including when it comes to the UN central role in international affairs. And given this important date in bilateral relations, we agreed to exchange messages at the level of foreign ministers. On the 19th of February, Russia and Saudi Arabia celebrate a landmark 100 years anniversary of diplomatic relations. Our country became the first state to recognize the Kingdom of Hijaz, Najda, and the other regions that joined, that turned into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia under the leadership of King Al Saud. This step laid a solid foundation of future strengthening and galvanizing versatile ties between our friendly states that are built upon trust, respect, and account for each other's interests. Today, it is an important partner of Russia in the Middle East. We have established many-level political dialogue, and the tone is set by the leaders of Russia and Saudi Arabia, the President of Russia, and King Salman, as well as the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. we develop our comprehensive interaction actively with Riyadh. We have this joint intergovernmental Russia-Saudi Arabia Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technical Cooperation, and the latest session took place successfully on December 1st, 2025 in Riyadh. We are the key producers of oil in the world, and the coordinated actions between them have a direct impact on the global economy. Our countries initiated the OPEC Plus format. It brought together OPEC and non-OPEC members. The decisions within the OPEC Plus help mitigate price fluctuations and ensure the predictability in the market. A significant role in our relations is played in cultural and humanitarian area, and the bright case in point is the participation of Saudi Arabia in the revived Intervision International Music Contest. It took place successfully in Russia in September last year, and it further on decided to host this contest this year in Saudi Arabia. Throughout this year, we plan to organize various events. Not so long ago, during the visit of Mr. Minihanov to Saudi Arabia, the Consulate General in Jeddah opened a memorial plaque to honor Consulate General and the permanent representative of the Soviet Union to Saudi Arabia, Mr. Hakimov. We also plan to have a photo exhibition in the Russian Foreign Ministry, engaging various ministries, members of parliament, academia, media, representatives, as well as diplomatic missions of friendly countries. We will also organize a host of academic discussions, roundtables, seminars, and sessions. For instance, at the Hakimov Club, we plan to have this, and within the Russia Islamic World Strategic Vision Group. And a landmark in the celebration will be the participation of Saudi Arabia as the guest country in the 29th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Such a step will help further strengthen our business partnership and galvanize cooperation in the most important and promising sectors. We will definitely keep you updated on all the events that I've mentioned. There is more to come. It's just the main lines around which we will organize this anniversary celebrations. On February 18th to 21st, within the Gorchakov Foundation, we'll have the third diplomatic forum in the name of Turkey, and the main topic is diplomacy amid hybrid wars. The participants will discuss nuclear non-proliferation, international law, and the state sovereignty principle. They will also cover neocolonialism at the modern stage with a focus on a fair world order. Prominent statesmen and public activists, experts, political scientists, historians, and journalists will address the platform. The organizers invite everyone aged under 35 to participate, and as per tradition, we'll provide the link in the text of our briefing. With that, I'm ready to take your questions. International Life magazine, are you here with us? Hello. Well, happy Diplomats Day, first and foremost. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that you're also involved. You have a lot to do with this day, so happy Diplomats Day to you as well. I would like to know your comment on the report by the UN Secretary General regarding the threats from the Islamic State. We follow this information, and in principle we agree with the majority of the provisions on the 22nd report of the UN Secretary General on the threats to international peace and security by ISIL, especially when it comes to the terrorist threat. It is growing, it is becoming more versatile, but we have something to add. A topical topic of the report is the growing use by terrorists, including the Islamic State, of new and emerging technologies. And judging by this document, these terrorist organizations make bet on improving the drone technology, but we're not just talking about drones that are being used for reconnaissance, for logistics, and for terrorist attacks. It is important to prevent the use of commercial terminals, including Starlink, and the states that have the relevant technological companies. We hope that they will be visionary and they will take efficient measures to confront such a threat. And we support the call by the Secretary General to states to actively cooperate between each other and with the United Nations to address this issue and to help responsible use of new technologies in combating terrorism. Naturally, we share this idea that the situation is degrading in certain areas of Africa due to terrorist presence, and we should pay tribute to the Africans. They are at the forefront on a daily basis. They confront terrorists and they achieve certain success, especially in such hot regions as Sahel. Having said that, we have to state that a number of non-regional stakeholders stand in the way of such a struggle, and they continue to cooperate with terrorists. They use them as a tool to implement their geopolitical goals, and by doing so they help destabilize the situation using various terrorist groups. Well, as an example, the developments that happened on the African continent involving the Kiev regime, we condemn the incessant attempts of certain countries to rebuild their colonial influence in Africa. We have repeatedly stated that they have no qualms in choosing various means. For instance, in January, there was an attempted murder of President of Burkina Faso. Niger is also suffering from terrorists. In late January, there was an attack on the airport in Niamey, and the responsibility was taken by the Islamic State, and there was a Western trace in here. Let's get back to the Kiev regime. It supplies weaponry to terrorists, it trains fighters, and the most active link between Ukrainians and terrorists is visible in Mali. Last year, terrorist attacks in this country and the killing of civilians, they took place, and we provided the relevant facts. We call on the international community to take active measures to prevent weaponry from getting in the hands of terrorists, and it should be punished. So let me also draw your attention that Africa is suffering from uncontrolled pumping of weaponry to the Kiev regime by the West, because through black markets the weaponry ends up in Africa. Well, allegedly this is the weapons that are designed for Ukraine, but it ends up everywhere, and we see the increase in the traffic of this weaponry in Africa. We call on the UN member states to remember about the fundamental principle of the international law, the cooperation principle. The Western countries should stop interacting with terrorists directly or through Ukraine. Russia stands for a depoliticized and professional interaction in counterterrorism, building upon the norms and principles of the international law. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ria Novosti, Crimea. Are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Good day. Our question is about Russian archaeologist Alexander Butagin. Does the Russian Foreign Ministry take any measures to prevent him from illegitimate persecution, to liberate him, and to prevent him being extradited to Ukraine? The Russian Foreign Ministry continues to do its utmost to help Russian archaeologist who was detained in Poland under absurd accusations made by Ukraine. We use the whole diplomatic toolbox. Our embassy in Warsaw provides all the necessary assistance within its purview. It is constantly in touch with his lawyers. We help provide information to his relatives, and we provided the documents. They were prepared by the State Hermitage, and they confirm that Mr. Butagin carried out the archaeological works from 1999 to 2025 in line with all the rules. Thank you. TASS agency, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Artem Popov, TASS agency. Reportedly, the first session of the Board of Peace will take place on the 19th of February, and notably, the Russian president's spokesperson said that Russia will not be represented, and the Foreign Ministry is considering this issue. Do you have any shape position on this matter, and will somebody from your diplomatic agency participate in this session? Russia will not be represented at the session of the Board of Peace. We continue to shape our position on this matter. Thank you. Thank you. Newsfront Bulgaria, are you here with us? Okay, moving on. Verelk. Colleagues, we do not have much time today, so we will keep it short and simple. Madam Zakharova, hello. I have two questions. First one, could you please comment on the visit by Vice President Vance to Azerbaijan and Armenia, as well as the arrangements that were reached, including in nuclear energy? As for any details on the announced project of small nuclear reactors U.S. made worth $9 billion, well, these details were not provided, and I was quite interested in this topic because it's curious to know how they were produced, where they're produced. According to some Armenian media, it is an unparalleled American investment in the Armenian economy. Well, this was the Russian translation. I do not know how that was put in Armenian, but I hope that this word means that it's one of a kind, and that will definitely happen. But supposedly the Armenians are to pay for that, not the Americans, and the funds will go through the TRIP Foundation. Allegedly, it is conceived for other investment projects, so it looks quite murky. Well, let's delve into the detail a bit more. When it comes to energy matters, this is all very curious. Probably you have seen reports on the construction of the nuclear power plant that were discussed regularly with Yerevan at various levels, and Rosatom regularly comments on this topic, as well as the comment of Deputy Foreign Minister Mr. Galuzin regarding the modalities of possible Moscow participation in TRIP project. I should say that Yerevan is free to choose its partners. However, the choice in favor of American technologies, it raises some issues. The U.S. small nuclear power plants are non-existent. It's not that they do not exist in the U.S. territory. They do not exist at all. They only exist on paper. If that's not true, well, correct me if I'm wrong. I try to understand where we can take a look at these miracles of technology, but I haven't found anything. As for the price, it could be much higher than the tentative price that you can see in some promotion materials, and the project of this small nuclear power plant was put on ice in 2024 in the US because the cost rose from 5 to 10 billion USD. Allegedly, Armenia would use it will be used as a test range for the untested American technologies. And hence, it begs the question, what will be done with the nuclear waste? Where will it be buried? In the Armenian territory, in the Armenian mountains? Let's get back to our cooperation, energy cooperation with Armenia. We are a trusted partner of Yerevan in nuclear energy for decades. In 1995, the Russian side helped rebuild and relaunch the Armenian NPP. For all these years, we have been providing assistance in operating this, in maintenance and supplying of fuel to the NPP, and with our help, we have extended the operation till 2026, and thanks to that, the Armenian NPP is still in operation. We are working together at another project to extend the life cycle of the NPP till 2036. Russia is the only state who's been operating small nuclear power plants, and we have repeatedly provided the tested solutions to our partners, whether it is big NPP or small NPP.
We have various options which would make sure that the nuclear power maintains a solid share in the energy balance of the Republic. The competitive advantage of the Russian technologies has been showcased to the Armenian side on numerous occasions. Last time was on the 6th of the Rosatom State Corporation, Mr. Likhachov, with the chair of the National Assembly of Armenia, Mr. Simonyan, as part of his official visit to Russia. There were numerous discussions of this topic during the sessions of the Bilateral Intergovernmental Commission on Economic Cooperation, and mindful of the nature of the bilateral relations between our two countries, we stand ready to elaborate reduced rate financing models, and we talked about this with the Armenian side too, so all these proposals are still relevant. However, should you find any successful project of the aforementioned American model, please share it with us. Did I answer your question? Yes. In fact, we had two questions. The second question is, what is your view of the visit of J.D. Vance to Armenia? We have already shared our views during the publishing of the official materials. And the second question to Madam Zakharova, you mentioned the interview by the Deputy Foreign Minister Galuzin, who was talking about Russia acting as a guarantor for the Armenian nuclear power sphere. And he once again said that Russia stood ready to discuss the parameters for Moscow's possible participation in the future project. I have a question. What is the basis for the approach of the Russian side? If the Armenian authorities themselves are saying that this is an entirely Armenian-US project and that Russia will not be invited to join, we see that they are preferring the American side in the construction of the new nuclear power plant. I just made a comment on that. As I said, we have had a long history of cooperation on this track, and it is mutually beneficial. It contributes to strengthening the energy security of our two countries and the region in general. This is not a joking matter. This is not something you can start talking about, then getting the money, and then immediately start constructing some foundation, and then leaving it behind, like they did in the US in 2024. This is a matter of energy security. If the climate were different, and if they could afford not getting heating, or if they had any other sources of energy, perhaps this matter would not be as serious. However, we know the meaning of aid and humanitarian aid to the people of Armenia. We know how the people need warm clothing. We know how families need help when they can't receive any conditions for living. We've been through that. So we want to start getting into these things, since we share a common region, since this is about our common energy security. You can't just say that this would never concern the interests of the entire region, and most importantly, we are reliable partners for Yerevan and have been throughout the years. These are all the arguments. And on trip, we will publish the answer on the website in more detail. Is the Rush today with us? Hello, Anastasия Mirovich, RT Balkan. We have one question today. How could you comment on the position of the UK ambassador to Serbia, saying that in accordance with the resolution 1244 they have the right to arm the regime in Pristina? What is the purpose of arming the so-called Kosovo security force, and why is Great Britain organizing joint exercises of Kosovo and Ukrainian soldiers? This is a classic fake story. The interview that you mentioned contains examples of distortions and replacements of notions. This is the classic of the toolkit of the false facts and narratives used by the West. We see London and other capitals are aspiring to legitimize the secondary role of the UN Security Council in the Kosovo settlement. Article 25 of the UN Charter prescribes mandatory compliance by all member states with the decisions of this key body. However, the West tacitly perceives the UN Security Council Resolution 1244 and the principles laid down in it as allegedly not meeting the realities of today. This is not only about the disregard by EU and NATO countries of the ban on the activity of any military formations in Kosovo, except for international presence. The first and main blow to the Resolution 1244 was struck in 2008 by the mass recognition of the unilaterally proclaimed independence of the so-called Republic of Kosovo. Thereby, the decisions of the UN Security Council on introducing a transitional regime for the region while maintaining the territorial integrity of Serbia and searching for a final solution exclusively through negotiations between Belgrade and Pristina was subjected to open sabotage. We talked about this many times. So when the UK ambassador speaks about states that recognized Kosovo, the exact number of which he found difficult to name, he speaks first of all about participants in the collective violation of international law. This has nothing to do with the declared acquisition of sovereignty by Pristina and the appearance of its own defense and security interests. This anti-Serbian action has nothing to do with that. It may seem strange, but the UK ambassador to Serbia is not familiar with the content of the basic Brussels agreements of 2013-2015 between Belgrade and Pristina, concluded under the written guarantees of the European Union, the cornerstone of which is the creation of the community of Serb municipalities of Kosovo. I am not mistaken. The UK was still part of the EU back then. Pristina has defiantly ignored this obligation for almost 13 years. This, however, did not prevent the Briton from baselessly accusing the Serbian side of not fulfilling them. I think they're confused in their own tricks, and the diplomat characterized the agreements of the parties from 2023 as legally binding. Perhaps he forgot that at that time only oral, unsigned understandings were discussed, which Belgrade subsequently officially rejected as contradicting the national interests of Serbia. We once again state that a sustainable settlement of the Kosovo problem is possible exclusively on the basis of the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. We will accept only such a solution that suits the Serbs themselves. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have Sputnik Belarus? Good afternoon, Andrei Sobolevsky, Sputnik Belarus. On the 9th of February, the Press Bureau of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service published information that the Western intelligence services, Poland, the UK and so on, are seeking the so-called liberal activists to prepare more cult revolutions. How do you perceive the risks of such activities for the entire Union State of Russia and Belarus, and how are you coordinating the efforts to prevent any foreign attempts to undermine the constitutional order and sovereignty of our countries? We fully share the assessments given by the Foreign Intelligence Service. We have no reasons to doubt the severity of the threats. As you know, in 2020, the Western regimes already tried to establish a network of their influence agents to organize a cult revolution in Belarus. However, thanks to the determination of the Belarusian authorities and people, a Maidan in Belarus was prevented, but the West is still trying to detach our countries from each other. They are trying to seek revenge. Perhaps they are seeking a moment for such an activities. A hypothetical coup in Belarus would undermine all the achievements of our union state with Belarus. Belarus has always been seen as a stronghold of stability at our western border. However, the Belarusian society has already received a vaccine against attempts to destabilize the internal political situation. The Republican authorities have taken a number of decisive measures to cleanse the country of the so-called pro-Western democratizing structures and tighten legislation regarding NGOs in order to prevent their subversive work from within. Nevertheless, we and our Belarusian allies do not intend to sit idly by. As far as we know, close partnership interaction is being carried out between our Security Council and special services. The Ministries of Foreign Affairs also contribute to this work in addition to close coordination and mutual support on international platforms in accordance with the bilateral program of coordinated actions in the field of foreign policy. With our active participation in recent years, the legal framework of the Union State in the field of security has been qualitatively strengthened. In December 2024, let me remind you, the Supreme State Council of the Union State approved the security concept of the Union State, which contains a comprehensive assessment of existing and projected threats to the security of our integration association, with a set of joint measures to neutralize and prevent them. On the sidelines of this event, the presidents of the two countries also signed an interstate agreement on security guarantees within the framework of the Union State, which entered into force in March 2025. It fixes a wide list of mutually allied obligations to ensure defense, protect the sovereignty, independence and constitutional order of Russia and Belarus, the integrity and inviolability of the territory and external border of the Union State, employing all available forces and means, including nuclear weapons, in accordance with the fundamentals of state policy of the Russian Federation in the field of nuclear deterrence approved on November 19, 2024. In September 2025, the first meeting of interdepartmental delegations of the two countries, headed by deputy foreign ministers, Mr. Grushko and Mr. Sekreta, appointed by the presidents of Russia and Belarus as special representatives for the review of the operation of the treaty, took place in Moscow. During the negotiations, the coincidence of assessments of the situation in the security sphere of the Union State was noted. In March of this year, the second meeting of special representatives will be held in Minsk, at which a wide range of threats to the external and internal security of our countries will be considered, and joint steps to stop and prevent them will be determined. Thank you. Let us move on. Is the news.ru with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. News.ru, Pavel Vorobyev. We have one question today for you. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Europe was intending to give Europe 250 aircraft, including 150 Swedish Gripen fighters and 100 French Rafales. Why do you think this is taking place? A few days after the latest round of negotiations between Russia, the US and Ukraine in Abu Dhabi, why do EU countries continue to pump Kiev with weapons? This message is not news. Back in 2025, Zelensky repeatedly spoke about plans by Stockholm and Paris to supply their aircraft to Ukraine. Moreover, in October and November last year, he signed corresponding agreements with Swedish Prime Minister and French President. However, Matters have not yet gone beyond declarations of intent, and it is unlikely that anything will change in this regard in the foreseeable future. Europe simply does not have the production capacity to implement such ambitious plans. At the same time, the announcements of new military financial tranches from Western sponsors, frequently voiced by Kiev, convincingly testify to the absence of any desire for peace on their part and its curators, and their determination to continue the conflict. I see. Thank you for the answer. Thank you. I see numerous questions from the Chinese journalists. I know that they ask me to make a comment on the upcoming festivities in China for the Lunar New Year and do it in Chinese. If I may, I will do it separately and we will publish this as a video. And I will have the great pleasure in doing so. Let us move further. Is the Reuters agency with us? Yes, good afternoon. We are with you. We have a question concerning Ukraine, in particular about an article by the Politico, which says that the EU is developing a plan for Ukraine's partial accession to the EU as early as next year. We have a question. Is Ukraine's EU membership still acceptable to Russia? And does Russia not fear the risks? Or rather, is Ukraine's potential EU membership a risk for the beginning of a pan-European conflict? I like the wording about the partial accession. I think the EU is already partially involved with Ukraine. Now they only need Ukraine to partially join the EU to hit the final nail on the European Union. All of this wordplay and endless seeking of new wording, even in violation of their own rules and norms, they have degraded the situation on the European continent to such a low state. There is no economic point, there is no humanitarian dimension, there is no coordination in the peace-building sphere if we are talking about this initiative. This is only about pure manipulations by the Western curators and the Kiev regime, which they are using as their own tool. We clearly understand that such activities will continue. We mentioned that there have been countries who are waiting to join the EU for decades. They've done all the trials, they have changed their legislation, but still they are deemed unworthy even to become partial members. Perhaps Ukraine is worthy of this proud title of the partial member. This is nothing but political manipulation. Thank you very much. We're going very fast through the questions. Is the Kadzin agency with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. I have a question regarding the situation regarding the expiration of the New START Treaty. When the treaty expired, certain US media reported that the governments of the countries were coordinating their efforts in order to begin talks on an extension of it. How do you think the talks between the countries will take place? And will they take place? All the arguments that we have presented due to the expiration of the New START Treaty have been presented in the declaration of the Foreign Ministry on the 4th of February this year, and that statement is still relevant. Dear colleagues, this will be the end of my briefing. I will answer all the remaining questions. Some of you, like the Chinese journalists, will get an exclusive video of a message in the Chinese language. Some will get their answers when we publish the materials on our website. Thank you very much.